So forms are something that you should already be familiar with from other classes like WebD 2300, but just as a quick refresher, let's look at some form fields and how we create our forms. So obviously our form is wrapped in a form tag, and it has several attributes that are important to us. Action is specifying where, when we hit submit on a form, where does the page go to? Where is this information going to go? So we could come in and say, okay, we want to go to formprocess.php once we submit this form. If we leave it blank, it's going to post back to the same page that the form is on, and that can come in useful for us. But you can do either. Method is either going to be post or get. Those are the two ways that we can submit information. By default, it's going to be get. Most of the time, post is going to be used. And just as a refresher on post and get, post actually submits it sort of in the background, all of the field values, and get submits things via the URL. All the variables that you would see in a URL, those are considered get variables. And so you can choose which one. Post is going to be the most common, and you have to use post if you want to upload files. Ink type doesn't have to be declared most of the time, but it is required that you declare the ink type as multipart /form-data if you want to upload files. So those are the three that are important to us. Let's look at a couple sample form fields here. If you remember, we assign labels to inputs by using the for attribute, and it needs to match the ID. So first name ID, for, that means that this label is being used for this input right here. The input is a type of text. The name is going to be the value that's submitted to the server as the identifying value. And then, of course, the value is going to be what's associated with that name. So we could pre-fill a value here, or we can let the user fill it in. Either way would work. We have input type of hidden. Same thing. We have a name and a value. Input type of radio. So radio buttons are going to be where people can select one and it unchecks another. And we do that by specifying a type of radio and by setting the name as the same. So for these two, we want to, if you click on male, it should unselect female and vice versa. And so we set the name of these to both be the same so that they understand they're supposed to work together. Then in these cases, we actually have the value preset, and that's going to be the value that's submitted to the server depending on which one they checked. And of course, you still got labels for those. Checkboxes are ones where you can check whatever you want to. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. For the name, so you can see here I'm using brackets. And this is going to allow us to submit both of these as sort of a subarray. But if we wanted to, we could just come in and do something like programming and studying, and that would work as well. But if we wanted to group these together for use in PHP, then you can put them in brackets and it'll actually be submitted as a subarray. Everything else, of course, values, those will be the values submitted if that particular checkbox is checked off. Then we have label for a file. So this is going to actually upload, if you want to upload pictures or PDFs or whatever, anything you want to upload you can do via the type of file. And we'll look at that more in depth later on. And you've got text area. It's a fairly common one. And that's all pretty straightforward. Now you notice there's not a value attribute, and actually the value is what's inside the text area. So if I want to pre-fill that, I'd say enter and put that in there. Then to submit the form, you have a button, type equals submit. You can add a name and a value, and of course put the text that you want someone to click on in there. This can also have a type of button, but if we set that, it's not going to submit the form. we use type of button for JavaScript use and things like that, but not so much for forms. All right, so we've got that. So let's look at what that outputs. First name, if I check this, obviously those become exclusive to each other, but I can check multiple of those. Then I've got a description here I can type in and then submit. So that's all pretty straightforward. There's tons of other input types that you can use, like color or date time or range, but they all are going to work pretty much the same way.